Carson, Leno, Fallon. Now, it's Wine Talks with Paul K.
Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And we are in studio today in beautiful Southern California, about to have a conversation with Stepahine Cook out in, wait, where are you?
Charleston, South Carolina.
In South Carolina. Introductions in just a moment. Wine Talks, of course, available on iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, wherever you hang out for podcasting. And this episode is sponsored by Total Wine. At Total Wine, find the best gifts for everyone on your list, whether it's a Cabernet for sis or a single barrel-aged bourbon for dad. With the lowest prices in over 30 years, you'll always find what you love and love what you find only at Total Wine & More. Spirits not sold in Virginia and North Carolina. Drink responsibly, B21. Have a listen to a recent release of Arthur Longcasson. He's the grandson of Elaine May Longcasson, who was alive during the war and saw the Nazis shoot up her parents' winery. And it's an incredible story. He now works at Marquita Marietta in Spain. But the history, you're just not going to hear anybody else. Have a listen to that. If you have something nice to say, go ahead and say it. If you don't, keep your mouth shut. And please subscribe to the show. I think you'll find future episodes really interesting, including this one with Stepahine Cook out in South Carolina. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We've been trying to do this for a little while, and I'm so happy you had to take the time this morning to join us. It's I think we're going to have a lot of fun talking about your career, what you've been doing, and why you got into the wine world in the first place. But let's start with that. It's not what you started out doing. You were born in Leesville, South Carolina, and
Right.
was hospitality in your future? Was wine in your future?
Well, my dad made wine when I was a kid out of muscadine and Stepahine grapes in South Carolina, in Leesville, South Carolina. It's not a mecca for wine coming out of there, as you can imagine. I used to fight my two brothers over who was going to stop the grapes when I was a little kid. So I always had wine on my brain growing up as a child.
Or between your toes, as it might be.
Absolutely, it was that. It was clearly an I Love Lucy episode, but in real life.
It's funny. Let me stop you there for a second, just for the listeners. Muscadine is a well-known grape throughout the South and the Midwest. And it actually, I don't know if South Carolina was part of this, but when Prohibition was repealed, the government went right to the South, Ohio, Louisiana, to replant muscadine. So where did your father find this stuff?
So my grandfather had a piece of property. He had 80 acres, and it was grown on that property that my grandfather had. So that's where he found the muscadine Stepahines. My father passed away unexpectedly in 2008, just kind of how the wine business came to fruition for me. I didn't want to live my life wondering what could have been or might be. So I decided to dip my feet into the wine industry. I'm actually a trained chef. I went to Johnson & Wales in Charleston, South Carolina before they moved to Charlotte. So at that time I had a catering event planning company. And after my dad passed away, I decided to sell that and to fulfill my dream being a winemaker. And then
you ever head examined at that time? Like, did you go to a psychiatrist to try to figure out why you want to do that?
I should have.
Let's go back just a minute to hospitality, because it's such an important part of our industry, and Johnson & Wales is such a well-known, celebrated hospitality school. Was it what you thought it was going to be when you went? I mean, did you? Doesn't sound like it prior, and we're going to talk about your modeling career here too. But it was when you got to Johnson & Wales and you realized that this is a pretty hard industry all the way around. Did it intrigue you, or did it inspire you to do more? Is that what?
It did inspire me to do more. I did really well in culinary school. I graduated magna cum laude from Johnson & Wales. And then I decided I wanted to learn Italian cuisine. So I went and did my stage in Italy.
Wow.
And so I could learn all the different regions of Italian cuisine. And then I came back and opened up a catering event planning company that I had for many years before I started Wonderment.
Well, I guess the name like Stepahine Cook, maybe that's probably makes sense, right? So,
I did catch a lot of shit for being chef cook when I was in culinary school.
Chef. Yeah, that's funny. My daughter's a French-trained boulangère. She studied under Alain Ducasse in Ysaint-Jean outside of Lyon, and this is not an easy industry, and wine isn't. We're going to talk about that too, but certainly hospitality in the back house is complicated, torturous, difficult at all. So did you did you come out going, wow, I really want, well, you started a catering company. So how did that,
Well,
is that out of love of the work?
It was a labor of love for me. I really, truly loved creating something and then someone enjoying it. It's the same with wine. Obviously, you only get one chance a year to create it in the wine industry. But it seems like every career that I've chosen has not been the easiest path to do. Mostly male dominating, as in the culinary and the wine world. So I guess the challenge for me is I'll take the challenge. So
that's great, because this is let's talk about that, because certainly culinary world has been dominated by men. I mean, most of the chefs that you read about, the French chefs, Ferdinand Pointe and all the rest of them were all beaucoup male. I wonder why that is. You know, going through the hospital. Let's talk about that. Going through the hospitality training, was there any awareness of gender in regards to that, or by the time you went, it was less obvious, or was there headwinds?
Less obvious, but it was still there, of course.
So it's interesting, because there was a woman in Chicago. She's a Michelin star chef, and she was starting a women's awareness group. She asked my daughter to be part of it, and it fascinates me, because it's in the wine world too. We'll talk about that we have to create organizations and create, the force to get the recognition. And did you face headwinds like that when you would, let's say, with your company?
Absolutely. I mean, I caught a lot of grief because models don't eat. Well, I like to eat. And then I learned to go to school to learn how to make really good food. So every career that I've had, it's just been, we know you like wine, but how are you going to go about doing it? And then when I started my catering event planning company, it was the same idea. And I was like, well, if you build it, people will come.
Yeah, so. Right. So when you left, when you were out of, I don't know, when did you start your modeling career? Was it when you were a teenager?
It was 17, 18 years old. Yes.
And how did that come about?
Someone saw me cheering at a football game in high school and came up to me and said, "You're beautiful. We think you would be great." So then I did a portfolio, sent it around to a couple people, and got some jobs here and there. Then I went to live in Europe for a while to continue modeling. Then I got to a point where, 16, 17-year-olds were looking, I was like me, but I'm 28 years old. So it's kind of hard when you're 28 to look like you're 16. So.
Yeah, but that's pretty good run, 12 years. But didn't you think?
I actually still model here and there still to this day. And I've got my son doing some couple things here and there with me. So I still love it. It's just not paying the bill, so to speak.
Weren't you a little suspicious as a teenager, or maybe your parents, like, "Hey, I think you're beautiful, come to my studio," kind of thing?
Oh, absolutely. My dad was not very thrilled about it at all. Obviously didn't believe that was going to happen for me and thought there was ulterior motives. But obviously time and persistence and my career chose that it wasn't, an ulterior motive, that they really did want. But it took some time for me to persuade my parents that this is a legitimate industry and I really want to be part of it.
Well, it seems like from an experience standpoint, you're young, so you're going to be a professional soon. Once you start this and you get to travel the world, you get to go see other cultures, see how businesses are run, see how that industry works. There's got to be some great value there.
Oh, absolutely. For sure. And I think it's come a long way over the years as well. It's just, it's gotten better. The industry has, luckily.
Do you think it's got more sensitive to the models' needs and
absolutely
lifestyle?
Well, it's a different world that we live in, so hopefully people are growing and the world's growing around you, so you have to sort of ebb and flow with what's going on currently in the world. So I don't think there was much of a choice.
Would you recommend to a young cheerleader now?
I would still be cautious, for sure.
Yeah. Well, you get your son involved too. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
No, I have a latent desire to be a celebrity. That's what I'm trying to do. My wife thinks I'm nuts, but whatever. It's 65 years old. So you go to Johnson & Wales, you get your degrees, you find a love of food, and you do a stage. And for the listeners, that's traditionally it's like the free day. My daughter did many of them, but I think this was longer than that. Did you get paid when you worked in Italy?
I did not.
And how long was that?
My stage was for 90 days.
Wow.
So I worked at the Park Hyatt in Milano. Is where I had to spend the 90 days. And then I went to Rome and I worked at a pizzeria. And then I worked at a place down in Sicily so I could learn the Southern cuisine as well as the Northern cuisine.
Wow. That's really interesting. Roman pizza, which is like, celebrated and different. And then you end up in Sicily, which is a totally different set of cuisine.
Absolutely. Lots of seafood and, it was just completely an amazing experience. I was there for cooking for about a year. I had to come home because my work visa was expiring. So,
well, the EU is not as generous as the United States when it comes to hanging around after you get into the country.
No, they basically told me that if I didn't leave, that I would be banned for coming back for 10 years.
Right.
So I didn't really have much choice.
When my daughter left the pastry school and she went to Paris and worked in a bakery, and she had an extra week when she was done, and she tells the chef, look, I got an extra week. I'm nothing to do. I'll come back for free. She goes, you can't. She goes, well, I'll be fined 50,000 euros for bringing you back in and taking somebody else's job. I'm like, wow, that's pretty stiff.
Pretty serious.
Yeah, pretty serious stuff. So let's go back to Sicily for a second, because I think one of my fascinations in the world of wine after all these years is the Sicilian wine trade. That Mediterranean, onshore breeze that creates this amazingly, is that even a word, salinity?
It is salinity, yes. Salinity and minerality is all of that.
So how did that, was part of this excursion down to Sicily, did you learn the love of pairing wines and making foods? Or I have this thing that what grows together goes together, right? So I
agree with that. And unfortunately, in that period of time, I was focused only on the food, not so much the wine. It didn't appear to me at the time to put them together. Obviously, I was drinking wine when I was there, but I wasn't really focusing on wine per se with my food.
And how long ago was that?
Oh my gosh. Well, I've owned Wonderment going on 13 years, so wow. It's been a while.
Because that the trade down there has accelerated as many wine regions of the world have become more popular as the barriers are less. There's less headwinds to the industry, but certain parts of it. So, Mount Etna wines have become very popular in general.
And they're amazing.
Yeah, they're fabulous. Actually, we're doing a family weekend down at the beach here in Southern California, and I deliberately grabbed a couple of Etna Rossos for my cousins to savor. So that's kind of interesting. So you come back and you're looking for something to do, or you had this in your head that you were going to create this catering firm.
Well, I came back and started one. It was called 28 Bridgeside, which was the name of the company. And it was in the Motley Rice building here in Charleston, South Carolina. I decided that's what I wanted to do. I want to do large caterings and I want to do weddings. So I combined the two together. Wow. It was very successful, but it was also very challenging with bride and bridezilla's mom, having to deal with those on a every weekend event. So after my dad passed away, I decided to sell my catering company and fulfill my dream being a winemaker. So I had had enough. I wanted to fulfill my dream. And that's how Wonderment came about. It was all because my dad passed away very unexpectedly.
Wow. I'm sorry to hear that. I know how it feels. And do you feel like that was something he wanted to have you do, or that he appreciated the fact that your love of wine started with stomping muscadine grapes in the cellar?
I think it had to do with his appreciation of me enjoying my childhood and having those wonderful memories of making wine. Obviously I started the company after he passed away, so he has not doesn't really know anything about it, but it was just something that was always in the back of my head that I felt like I had to do. Like I needed to do this in my life. I would rather have failed and not have done it than do it and fail and say, I wish I would have,
right.
You gotta do it.
Yeah. And it's that kind of motivation is hard to put away. I mean, I have to say my father just passed away 2 years ago, and he was lived a long life, but what I'm doing now really is a reflection of his love of the industry and he's missed a lot of the stuff that I think he would have loved to have happened or known that it happened. But you're motivated by that.
Oh, absolutely.
In the back of your mind. So
and I'm very proud of where I come in the short time I've been in the industry. And I think that he would definitely be very happy with where I am. And luckily he's very thankful. I'm very thankful that he didn't leave me any recipes of the wine that he made whenever I was a kid, because it was more like moonshine and rum and alcohol.
Well,
you know,
was it slightly sweet? Because muscadine is sort of a
very sweet. Yes.
Gosh, you know,
not anything I want to have my name on.
Yeah, we were in Kentucky a few years ago, and I guess it's kind of interesting. Maybe this, you can shed some light on this, because we're going to talk about why you end up in South Carolina, and or I know you've been to Napa many times and you work there, but there's something about maybe being in those locations and having those indigenous wines. We talked about Sicily wines for a second there, and when you're in Kentucky, I went to the mall by the University of Kentucky. There's a wine room there, mostly Concord and other sort of Vinus Labrusca type grapes. And, you know, I thought it was pretty good. And so then, and I love this part of the wine industry because it happens all the time. So I asked the vendor, I said, send me some samples to my office in SoCal and I'll taste it. And if I can put it in my club, I'd love to show my membership what happens in the Midwest or the South. I couldn't drink it when I got here. Like, what did I like about it when we were at the tasting room? But
maybe it was where you were. You were having the full experience and immersing yourself into Kentucky and Kentucky wine.
I think that's it.
And then when you got home, you were like, I can't drink this.
Maybe the muscadine's the same sort of thing in South Carolina. You're like, yeah, this is kind of gross when I drink it with dinner, you know, at a Michelin star restaurant, but it's pretty cool when I'm in South Carolina. So let's talk about that. What was your first step into the business? Because this is a tough racket. We know that. We'll talk about that along the way here. But what was your first soiree into the professional side of this business?
So I've been married, and at the time my husband had there was a Skurnik event in New York City. That's where he was living. He had a connection there and said, hey, I can get you into this. It was more of an industry event. And he goes, but I can get you in. You can go in, you can taste a bunch of wines. You get a chance to meet some of the winemakers and all that. So I had this opportunity. I did not pass it up. And when I was there at this event, I met Robert Bialy Vineyards. And I always loved his wines. And I basically said to him, I want to come and work for you for free in exchange for your knowledge. And him being the very traditional Italian, Catholic Italian, he looked at me square in the face and he said, no, I basically don't have women. I basically don't have women working in the cellar.
Wow. So wait, let's stop there for a second. Your first headwind, a gender, gender, what's what I'm looking for? Anyway, headwinds because of your gender. That's so fascinating. An Italian guy, no less. All right.
The idea was I would be a distraction in the cellar. So I showed up at his winery in the fall of 2011. And I said, here I am, and you're going to have to teach me how to make wine, and I'm going to work for you for free.
Wow. And
then that's where I did my first intern, was with him. I convinced him to let me work with him, that I would be, obviously, all I wanted to do was learn. And who doesn't like free labor? So we became really good friends, and I became really good friends with his family. And I also made my first wine that year at his winery, and I made 250 cases of wine.
Wow. Perseverance, Calvin Coolidge, perseverance is omnipotent, I think.
It is.
Wow.
So from there, I decided, obviously, I wanted to do more interns. So I went to work at Spotswood. Then I went to work at Anomaly. Then I decided to be really clever and do 2 vintages in 1 year. So I went to Spy Valley. I was the night chef winemaker for the Whites program in Blenheim, New Zealand for Spy Valley Wines. And then I came back and I worked at Stackland. So
fairly
the wines
I
made. I'm sorry?
It's a fairly pedigreed stuff you're doing there.
Absolutely. I figured, because I did not have an enology degree from UC Davis, I needed people to take me really seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, I went to work with some of the best winemakers that I could possibly convince to let me work for them, all along still making my own wine at the same time.
This is an interesting thought because I just got off the phone with, I just had a podcast with a professor at Cornell, and his job is to, I already brought this up before in a podcast, but his job is to find food grade coatings for cans. And I say that because, as with some of the degrees like a Master Somm, a Master of Wine, which I think are incredible accolades to earn, that there's still two approaches to not only wine knowledge, which is in that case the academic approach, which is theirs, which will teach you nothing about the pitfalls of trying to run a winery. Right. And this is where you didn't go to enology school, but you're making wine. And certainly, till recent times, most winemakers didn't go to enology school. They just did by the seat of their pants. And so, So the point I'm trying to make is this balance between academia and lab work and biology and chemistry versus, what the monks learned in Burgundy, just doing it.
Right. And I figured trial and error. I needed to immerse myself by doing it. And that's the only way you're going to learn is by actually physically making wine.
Making a couple mistakes.
And in everything we do, we make mistakes. It just, hopefully there'll be smaller ones and hopefully not really financially involved where there have been huge mistakes when you lose all your wine or something. So
I guess it's a new phrase. Some mistakes taste better than others, maybe. I don't know.
We do, absolutely.
Well, that's interesting thought. So now, and you said it already earlier, which is you only get one chance a year, which I don't think most people understand how slow this industry is. You can make as much beer as you want, as often as you want, apple cider as often as you want, but you can only make one. You only get to test your theories and only make a mistake once a year. But you decided to go to the southern hemisphere to get two vintages in 1 year. How important? And this is sort of a philosophical question. How important to you was it to have the experience from the southern hemisphere in a completely different wine region to learn what? To learn their methodologies, their approach, their thought processes. What'd you come away with by doing that?
I came away with that's not how I want to make wine.
Right.
It's machine harvested. They just throw all the wine in a big old 18-wheeler and just dump it into the winery. There's no hands-on. People aren't in the vineyard actually picking the grapes. They're beating the hell of the vines with the mechanical. Just, it was a takeaway. Sometimes you learn what you don't want to do versus what it is that you really want to do. I'm more hands-on. I want everything to be hand harvested. I want to touch every single one of those grapes before it gets into that bottle. This was the takeaway of this. That's not how I want to make wine. But I needed to go there to learn that.
Yeah.
Let's take a break from our conversation with Stephanie Cook. Incredible conversation about somebody getting into the wine industry. Hey, a wine club subscription makes an impressive gift for all the wine lovers on your list. You will be a hero with a subscription to the Gold Medal Wine Club, featuring hand-picked selections that please the beginning wine enthusiast to the most discriminating connoisseur. Visit www.goldmedalwine.com to join or send a tasteful gift. Use promo code PAULK, P-A-U-L-K, for 10% off your first order. That's the Gold Medal Wine Club. And back to Stephanie Cook. Listen to her career. It's incredible. Cheers.
And how about the idea that certainly in New Zealand, they're growing Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Noir, if you're in Marlborough or Martinborough, wherever you were. But yeah, there has to be a philosophical approach that's a little bit different.
Oh, absolutely. For sure.
And so
they're making basically bulk wine selling all over the world. There was no craftsman to it for me.
Okay, so that goes to this question I had yesterday with this woman from Adelaide, which was, she was saying that, well, the wine world they really know what they're doing. They don't know how to bend. They don't be flexible. They don't know social networking, blah, 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 all the digital stuff, which is inaccurate. But then she's talking about 19 crimes, which is exactly the kind of thing you're talking about, which is this mass-produced crap, but it sells. And it sells because maybe because they put an augmented reality label or whatever the reason is, but I think mostly because when just like drinking muscadine sugar water. Maybe not quite that bad, but versus what you're talking about, which is hands-on. I'm going to produce the best wine I can from the grapes I'm doing, and in order to do that, I need to be touching them. I need to be looking at them. I need to be tasting them. I need to be hauling them myself. I need to do the things from start to finish that'll put my stamp on the brand.
Correct. Absolutely. 100%.
So
and that's what I do now with my brand is I'm in the vineyard. I'm taking samples. I'm doing analysis. I know the pH, the TA, all that. I'm tasting it. I need to taste it. I mean, that's how you decide about when you're going to harvest. Is the analysis are one thing, but what does it taste like?
So how much of that final taste is? This is a tough question, but it's a balance, really. Is it a balance between what Stephanie? Oops, just dropped my water. Stephanie Cook wants her brand. What's the name of the brand? Wonderment, right? So,
Wonderment.
I didn't know if you had labels inside that, but let's just say what Wonderment represents to its drinking public is a balance between what the vineyard's giving you and what you want this brand to express. How hard
Absolutely.
is that?
100%, for sure.
Now, how hard
I want the wine I want you to be tasting the varietal, and I want you to also be tasting where the terroir, where it's coming from. Okay. The clones, like with my Pinots, you get certain characteristics out of different clones, old vines in versus new vines in. I have never bought a new barrel ever in my 13
really?
years
Wow,
of
that's
making wine.
Yeah.
I refuse to, for the reason being, I want you to taste the varietal. I want you to be able to taste that minerality coming from the really rocky soil. Putting it in 100% new oak barrel, you're masking it with a bunch of oak. So I really, truly want you to taste what I taste whenever I'm out in the vineyard and give you the best example of wine that I can make from where it comes from.
So where are these vineyards?
So mostly in Sonoma. I get some fruit, some Hyde Sauvignon Blanc from Canaris on the Napa side, and I get some Pinot from Canaris on the Sonoma side. The rest of it is from Rock Pile, Russian River Valley, Lake County.
All pedigreed places. And where is the facility where you're crafting the wines?
So I make the wine at Laird Family Estate, which is off of 29 across from Trite in Napa.
Mm-hmm.
That's where everything happens there, bottling, making it, storage, everything.
So you're like cross country all the time.
I am. I like to tell people I'm bi-coastal. When it gets really, really hot here in Charleston, it's time for me to go to California and make wine.
Bi-coastal. Is that even part of the LGBTQ movement or anything like that?
If it is, I'm not a part of that. But anyway.
Well, that's an interesting thought, too, because actually, I was just reflecting this morning driving in here that most of my guests have been women in the last month or two, except when I was on the road. In fact, even on the road, when I was in Montalcino a few weeks ago, one of the great wine houses there, Silvio Nardi. There's a big awareness in this industry for women in wine. Have you sensed? You talked about the headwinds in the beginning, but have you sensed any difference in the last, let's say, 5 to 7 years in how you're being received, or you sound like you put your head down, do what you want to do anyway, so you just get it done? But has anything loosened up, or has anything tightened up?
I definitely think it's loosened up. There's more and more women making wine than there used to be. And I think that obviously with time comes experience, and the more experience you have, then people realize you're not going anywhere. You're here in the wine industry. You're here to stay. So, and when they taste the wines, obviously that's the most important part. So
that's a funny thing, because, I sold my company like 4 months ago, 35 years of DTC, 20 million bottles worth, probably 100,000 wines tasted. And everybody's like, what are you going to do now? I'm like, well, I'm not going anywhere, because it's impossible to once you indoctrinate yourself to this industry and that value of that great glass of wine, like the Burgundy I had last night, you're never going to leave. You may be doing different things, but you're never going to leave.
I always say just rearrange your schedule. You just do something different, a little different. It's like I don't ever foresee myself retiring. I feel like I'll just rearrange my schedule a little bit.
And so you've been able to make this work. How many cases are you making now?
I make around 1,500 to 2,000 cases. So super small production.
And where can people get them?
You can buy it off my website. I'm not going to be in big box stores, but if you're small boutique wine shops where they're really hand sold by the people who are working there, you'll find them there. High-end restaurants. Yeah.
And how are you telling people that exist? Because this is the discussion I had with this young lady yesterday. She very philosophical, and the idea that wineries don't understand marketing, which is probably true. We're farmers. I mean, generally not. I'm a horrible farmer, but in general, wineries start as farms and they become wines. And marketing wine is very hard, and the margins suck, and the headwinds are great, and the shelf presence is like toothpaste or shaving cream. You just you're not going to bump Procter and Gamble off of the shelf. Correct. So, when COVID came, were you ready for that in the sense of you had a robust enough e-commerce site to handle this? And did you see a spike, or were you sort of caught off guard that way?
We did see a spike. I wasn't really caught off guard. I kind of knew what was happening. Sales were incredible. People were sitting at home drinking wine. I probably sold more wine during COVID, as far as statistically from year by year during the lockdown, because that's what you had to do. You couldn't go out and get wine. So you were shipping it to people all over the world. So it was great.
And where is that done for you? Where's your e-commerce fulfillment done?
It's in California.
So it's a third party.
Yeah. Wine shipping is who I use.
Oh, you use wine shipping?
I do. Yeah.
My friend, the Delaney's.
Yes.
Ed Delaney. Know him well. We did our own. My wife's a CPA, and she I'm not paying those people to do that, and I'm going to do my own. So we had 38 tax returns to produce every quarter.
Wow.
Because of all the states, because we used our manufacturing license to ship. And that was no fun. And not, by the way, shutting those down was no fun either.
I'm sure not at all.
Ridiculous.
Well, you clearly had employees. I have no employees. I literally do everything myself.
Well, I think I like that. I think the idea of, vending is no problem. We actually, my wife and I 7-8 years ago, in fact, because of this trip that we went to wine shipping and see Rick Moradian, he's accumulating small clubs like mine and trying to make one large one as we speak. And we went and saw his facility because we were considering just shipping our wines up there, let them pack and ship. The reason we didn't do it is we saw the returns aisle, and we realized that, for us, it's totally different than a winery. All the wines that are being returned from FedEx, that they would just sit there and rot until it was easier for us to have it on hands-on here. But for you, I totally get it. It's much easier. So after COVID, we had a incredible spike. People are drinking better. They're drinking more. Mm-hmm. And then literally to like a week that the confinement was over, it changed. But I think it's better for wineries than a third-party club like ours was, in that there's a certain amount of loyalty to wonderment, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's wonderment, delight, change, surprise. It's exactly what it means. Yeah, I mean, I'm living the dream.
They want to know.
Who wants to know?
They want to know what Stephanie Cook is up to next, is really what it comes down to.
Oh, for sure. Well, when I figured out, I'll let the world know. So.
Well, yes, of course. Please enlighten me too, will you? Because
exactly. As of now, I mean, I'm really happy with the way wonderment, where wonderment is. Case production, my bi-coastal living works really great for me. I don't foresee me adding any more SKUs or ramping up production. I'm really happy where everything is. So.
And your son, is this going to be one of these situations where you hope he picks up the passion of what this industry is about and making wine, or he's too young for that right now?
And he's 10 years old. I think he definitely knows too much about wine for a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
I mean, he can open a bottle of wine better than most adults that I know.
Okay, that's funny.
He's very good at giving, this smells like grapefruit, or it smells, I can smell the minerality. I can, whatever. I think he will be interested in it. I don't foresee him following in my footsteps being a winemaker. He definitely wants to be part of the process at some point, but he's got his own ideas of what he wants to do in his life, and I'm not one to tell him what he should do. So,
I tell you what, though, I interview a lot of winemakers, and not the least of which would be the Clovis Tétanger, some of the great houses that they all set out to do something else, and it calls them back. And so doctors, lawyers, in Clovis's case, a master of business, going to be an international guy in Paris. And somehow this, the calling of the grape, and I don't know how to define this. It's a tough one. That what draws us to this? What is it? The uniqueness of expressing terroir? Is it? It's more than the 14% alcohol for sure, because you can do that anywhere. But it's the history. Well, let me ask this question: when you went to Paris, did you experience wine there? Were you looking for Burgundy, Bordeaux, Alsace wines?
Absolutely.
Have a chance to taste them with your son? Isn't that rewarding when you get to do that?
Absolutely. And he thought it was the most phenomenal thing in the world.
Really?
This wine from Burgundy tastes like your Pinot Noir that comes from Canera. I was like, well, it's very Burgundian style. Yes.
Wow.
For him to pick up on different things like that with me actually not having to set him down and go, well, this is what you should be tasting. He already knew what he should be tasting. So he already had part of that education. So I didn't really have to just, okay, you're going to taste this. Tell me what you taste. And he kind of figured it out on his own. So
that's pretty astute.
That's
pretty astute to take a Carneros Pinot and sort of relate it to a Burgundy, because that's probably the most Burgundian-like. It's an interesting thought, though. I think in '89 we went to McMinnville in Oregon for the Pinot Noir Festival, and it was the industry was just starting, and they were trying to figure out what they're doing. They were inviting all the famed Burgundian, Drouin, all those guys, Louis Jadot. They were all there, sort of sharing notes, and the concept was everything was compared to Burgundy. And
okay, yeah,
their wines really don't land anywhere near Burgundy, even though they think they're on the same latitude and all that. But the character of them should be different. There are a few districts, but Carneros is one of them where, you can sense this grape, the terroir and the grapes, but it should be different, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think obviously it's cooler over there. I mean, my Carneros Pinot Noir versus my Russian River Valley, I mean, they are just worlds apart. They're both very good. It's just, they just taste completely different.
Yeah.
If you were to blindfold them and you didn't know that the Carneros, you would think obviously it was Burgundy. But it also, the clones, that DJ Clone 115 coming out of Carneros versus Pommard and 777 coming out of Russian River Valley, they just produce completely different wines. And I actually make them exactly the same. I don't do anything different to them, which is what makes them so much more interesting, I think. When you talk about the terroir, you think about clones, you're really getting a really good example of how that works in winemaking when you taste them side by side.
So the end game for you is what? What are you trying to do? The end game
for me is to continue making really good wine. I mean, I'm not going to do this forever, so we'll see how long until what I decide to do next will be. I'm really having a good time making wine. I'm enjoying it. Hopefully we make some money along the way.
When you were in Europe, did you tell people you were a winemaker and say, hey, yeah, I'm in the wine trade, or you sort of kept it on the low down?
I generally don't do that. Yeah.
So,
and I mean, and the reason being is that, they will go, would you bring any wine? Of course, I didn't bring any wine, but I was bringing some back. It's just, I don't want any special treatment because I'm a winemaker. I mean, if that was the case, I would have called a chateau and said, hey, I want to come and taste wine and blah, blah, and plus I had my son with me. So taking a 10-year-old wine tasting and using that upper hand, I'm a vintner, and wasn't really the appropriate time and place for that.
It's kind of interesting with all the wines I bought and tasted over the years. But this last trip, I used the media side of this thing to gain access with old relationships. And it was this, and it's really not about the ego more than the camaraderie of it.
Mm-hmm.
because they would love to engage you. Now I understand if you're some with you and sometimes making appointments when you're on vacation is a little cumbersome because you're like, oh, I gotta go to this appointment, you know, and you're like,
Right.
I'm on vacation, I don't want appointments. But it's the reception we received this last trip when we were in Italy and Portugal and Paris was rather phenomenal, and I'll do it again.
So I had a rather put off experience when I was in France. We did a food and walking tour, and it lasted a couple hours. And at the end, the chef who was giving the tour had made us lunch. And as somebody had given him a bunch of wines, or he must have been friends with the person because they were all the same wines. There weren't, a bunch of different things. Anyway, so we're sitting there. I had spoken to some other people that were in the walking tour, and they knew that I was a winemaker. And they're like, okay, well. So we get to this dinner. The chef starts pouring these wines. Most of them are France, but there were some from some other places, none from the United States. He basically said that the people who make wine in the United States have no idea what they're doing.
Oh.
And I'm like, well, that is completely not true.
That's not right.
I mean, you want to talk about the Paris tasting in the 70s, okay?
Yeah,
All
exactly.
that Napa Valley on the map. And when I told him that I was a winemaker, and I said, don't worry. I said, when I give you a review, I'll tell him how inaccurate you are about Americans and how they make wine. It was a total turnoff. My son was even appalled. And the people who were sitting beside me was like, I can't believe that's what he's telling people on this food tour.
That ain't right. I'll use some American English. That ain't right.
So I was put off to that. So after that, I was like, I'm not going to tell anyone that I'm a vintner. So
I'm glad you brought that up, the Judgment of Paris, because it's a very fascinating story. My father was very close to the Winiarski, and the Barrett family was very close to. I used to visit my dad's store all the time. In fact, when I did Bo Barrett on the podcast, we were laughing about high school days because we were in the same school. But it's a little known part of the story. Two pieces of it. One, the woman in wine. If you talk about that subject, well, the woman that brought the wines over for Stephen Spurrier from Napa, also the woman that took him on tour to find the wines, is a woman named Joanne Dupuis, and she's still alive. She's like 98, 97. Mm-hmm. But I'll net the story because it's fascinating. They're at Alexis Lachine's Chateau, Lascombe, I think, and they're having lunch, and this is the part that it doesn't bother me. It's just interesting. Here's this woman in 1976. She's sitting next to Alexis Lachine and Andrei Telechev. I mean, the two of the greatest wine minds of the time. But it's a woman who got everybody there. And the Barretts are on this trip, and so are, I think, I don't think the Winiarskis are there, but there's a bunch of the Wetzels, I think, from Alexander Van Venus are there. And the phone call comes into the chateau for Jim Barrett. So the gentleman comes and says, there's a phone call for you, Mr. Barrett. And he goes, takes the call in this little tiny office, and he finds out that they had won, that the Chardonnay had beat the Chablis. And he comes back and he tells Joanne Dupuis, who's sitting next to Telechev, and tells Andrei Telechev the same thing. He says, I just won. And Telechev says, don't say anything. We're being hosted by these people.
Right. So I purchased fruit from the Bacigalupi family.
Oh, wow.
And the Bacigalupi sold part of the Chardonnay that went into the wine from Chateau Montelena came from the Bacigalupi family in Restaurant Valley.
That's great. So they've been at it for a long time, too.
They have. Yeah. It's pretty interesting when you go in the tasting room, you can see the weight tag when it was like hand typed, like back in the 70s.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And how little the price of fruit was back then versus what it is now.
That's a little scary.
It is.
And that's pedigreed fruit you're buying. And so
Absolutely.
How is your Chardonnay? What do you do with your Chardonnay? Are you making...
I don't make Chardonnay.
Oh, you buying Pinot from them?
I buy Ziffin, Old Vine Zen, and Petit Syrah.
Really? You're making a Petit Syrah too?
Mm-hmm.
What motivated you to do that? It's not a...
Well, they're known for their Chardonnay and they're known for their Pinot Noir. I beat to a different drum, so I wanted to do Old Vine Zen and Petit Syrah. So all the wines that I make are single vineyard desert, 100% varietals. I don't do any blending. And so after working at Robert Bialy, my love for Zinfandel obviously was in full force, and of course Petit Syrah. So I decided just to make two completely separate wines, no floater or anything. They're 100%, and see what I could do. It's the most beautiful example of Petit Syrah coming out of Russian River Valley. It's beautiful.
And so let me ask you this then. Russian River Valley, yeah. So we're not going to get that, extra thick skin. Is it sort of a structured? It's not this opulent, or is it? Maybe, I don't know.
It's definitely not a sucker punch. It's very, very approachable. It's got some floral notes on it. It's a beautiful wine. You can drink it by itself, or obviously with, something braised, a steak, obviously be really good with it.
Is it popular then from your customer base for Zin?
It is.
I mean, two varietals of Zin is a little more recognition than Petit Syrah does, but most Petit Syrahs are just acidic bombs or fruit bombs, one of the two, and you have something structured, so people are responding to it.
They love it. It's amazing. I've been making it for, oh my gosh, a long time now. So yeah, it's over 10 years.
What a great inspiring story that you have, and a varied career, and just chasing the dream, and that's what it's about. I mean, this is really fascinating.
I'm truly living the dream. I remind myself of that every day.
When you said that earlier, living the dream, it reminded me of I went to go to the Granger, which is that famous industrial supply house. And I walked in there, and there's a guy standing under the will call sign. He's wearing a polyester short sleeve shirt they probably bought from Sears, Roebuck or something, and a t-shirt underneath that you could see. And somebody goes, "Hey, Bob." He goes, "Hey, Bill." He goes, "How you doing?" He goes, "Just living a dream." And if there was a cell phone back then, this will call sign over his head was just, it's like, if that's what your dream is, I don't know. But this has been a fascinating conversation. I hope we can do it again. I hope really when next time you're in Napa, we're there quite often, that we can sit down and have a glass of wine together.
Let's do it. I'll be there for Thanksgiving. So let me know if you're around.
We're going up the first week of December. You going to be there that long?
No, my son has to come back to school. He's going to go out there with me.
Oh yeah, the old son in school routine. Okay, that's fine.
Yes, but I'll make sure we get some wine, and we meet up soon.
Yeah, we go there a lot, so we'll just check it out and keep in touch. And so good luck to all the things you're doing, and such a great story and inspiration. I hope that your success continues.
I appreciate it. Thank you for the time.
Cheers. Take care. Thank you for listening to Wine Talks with Paul Kalamkarian. Don't forget to subscribe, because there's more great interviews on their way. Folks, have a great time out there in the wine world. Cheers.